Hello, welcome to the October 8th, 2024 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer the questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed with the number of questions that come in. We will go through all of the questions chronologically as they are asked. But if you don't see an immediate response to your question, realize that we will get to it and we don't need to ask. If we could avoid asking the questions repeatedly, that would be helpful and just allows us to get through more questions in a more concise manner. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, so if it's 11, 12, 13, which level, so if it's Cubase Elements, AI, LE, Artist, or Pro, and also which operating system, that information is helpful. Several hours after the live stream ends, we should have an index with all the topics covered in today's live stream, pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps so you could quickly navigate to particular topics. And if you want to find topics and search for topics have been covered in previous live streams, we have over 34,000 topics. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. We also have two people that serve as moderators, Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees. They do it to make it a better community experience, so we appreciate their efforts. We'll also give a special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. So it's a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. All right, so once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia, in the United States. So please, if you're watching this, please feel free to introduce yourself, or if you're watching on a replay, and tell us where you're from. It's always fascinating to see people from all over the world joining. All right, so we have the first question from Mark Chiambo. Hey Greg, Cubase 12, Cubase 13 on M2 Mac Studio running Sonoma. Whenever I export an MP3, it always skips a bar's length at time 3 minutes 30 seconds. Exporting WAV files at times results unplayable files. So I experience this. So usually when I hear of something like this, it could be that there's a plugin that's misbehaving. So make sure all of your plugins, like you don't have a plugin that's running in a trial mode or demo mode, and see if there's a particular plugin that comes in at 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And I bet that if you bypassed all, you could see quickly if you bypassed all plugins or, saved a different version and removed all the plugins, if it still happened at 3 minutes and 30 seconds, my guess is it's going to be a plugin that's misbehaving, that's causing the silence at that particular moment in time. So let me know if you're running like any third-party plugins and see if you get isolated to that. But, when I've heard of situations like that, it's generally kind of a plug-in, like maybe a trial version that's that has expired or something along those lines. All right, we have a question from Parabot2. Hi Greg, what's the best way to copy, extend a few bars of individual MIDI tracks all at once? Thank you. Okay, so let's say if I want to just move this over here. So let's say we have some MIDI events. So, let's say I have MIDI events here, and I wanted to take just a few of the MIDI events. If we go directly to the right center edge, we'll see that the cursor will turn into a hand. Then we could just drag across. I could also go select just particular events here. If I hold down my Alt or Option key and go to the lower right hand corner, we could drag across I could also just come over here and hit Command or Control plus the letter D for duplicate and be able to duplicate. So let me know if that's helpful and what you want to do. Parabot. All right, Parabot 2. All right, so we see Michael Marshall joining from Somerset, UK. We have Stefan from Sweden, Uno Memento from Finland, Daniel from Croatia. Great to see you back. All right, Mark Kiambos from Nairobi in East Africa. We have Tim K joining from Zeist in Netherlands. Buddy, his cat is waving a paw to my cat Steven, and Mark Rabin's dog Stella, and any other pets. All right, so we have Dean Garvey Jazz. Hello, Greg from the Sierra Mountains in California. So thanks great to have you on again. Always great to see Jazz Dude. All right, and we have Rich Schweitzer says ready for some wind and rain here in West Palm. So yeah, good luck with the storm. Seems like a massive storm. So I'm watching my friends in Tampa, St. Pete area where they're kind of migrating to. So, but I hope you and your family are safe in West Palm. All right, we see Jan from Stockholm. We see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, Fly V from Winnipeg, Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. All right, Mati Rojas just says you are the GOAT. I think it's a compliment. Hope it is, anyway. But thanks for joining us on the live stream. All right, we have Merrick Michalak joining from Rochester, England. All right, so we see from Daniel, says, I'm interested in Groove Agent, Beat Designer, Drum Editor, and all that stuff. I plan to go through your past answers, but those are answers I expect. Not everything is there or structured. Says, can I completely learn Groove Agent, Beat Designer, and let's see, the drum editor from previous answers, or is there a guide with every functionality and shortcut and tip and trick? So there are dedicated like tutorial videos that you could find on the Cubase YouTube channel, where done like just a beat designer walkthrough, several Groove Agent walkthroughs, the drum editor walkthroughs. So I think you can probably find most stuff there. But if you have particular questions, just let me know and be happy to help you along your way. All right, wonderful to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We have Millard Brown from Pennsylvania. We have Martin checking in from Germany, if I believe. We have Recyclop from Finland. Okay, so we have clarification from Mark Chiambo. Thank you, Greg. On the skips at 3:30, this has occurred with different projects. No automation of plugins have been done. Exporting the same project on an Intel MacBook Pro has no issue. So just out of curiosity, if you're running a VST2 plugin, so I'm not sure if you're running Mark in, and it doesn't, if you're running in Apple Silicon native or if you're running in Rosetta mode. So if you're running in Rosetta mode, that would allow you to run VST2 plugins. The plugin doesn't have to be automated for it to have an impact. So, the difference between like the Intel MacBook Pro and the Apple, I think you mentioned you had an M2, is that, VST2 plugins aren't compatible with being Apple Silicon native. So that could be if there's a plugin discrepancy. But see if if it's happening on multiple projects, try just putting one file, even if you record something like a test tone. So come over to like an input channel. So say we'll go to mono in one, and as the insert, I'll just turn the volume down here before. On the insert, put a test tone generator. So go under tools and go to test generator. This will give you kind of like just a little bit of a test tone. We can add an audio track. We're going to set it to mono in 1. So as we add this, we can, so to try just recording with no plugins at all. So once we have this on our input channel, so we see that we're going to have the signal, just put it in record for a couple of minutes. And once you're in record for record like, if it's always happening at 3 minutes and 30 seconds, record like 4 minutes of audio. So absolutely no plugins, just record a straight test tone. And then what you want to do is to export that particular file. So set your left and right locators around the whole thing. So record 4 minutes of that and do an export audio mix down. We can just choose to create an audio track. And we'll export, let's say, our audio file. And now you could, I had that one record enabled, so it's not going to help. So let me just export my audio mix down. We'll put on to create audio track and see if you have if you see the waveforms drop out. But again, the plugin doesn't have to be an automation. It could just be the plugin. And between an Intel Mac and your M2, it could be like a VST2 plugin. So there are differences between those two architectures. All right. So you see, Patrick, can I drag audio files out of Nuendo into another app similar to Wavelab 12? So I think it'll be kind of the same that we see here. So I'm not sure if we could drag out, let's just say if I come over here and I drop that file in. So I'm not sure if we could drag out to the desktop. I mean, we could export. So while it's not drag or drop, you could choose to export selected events. And here you could choose to export it to the desktop, and if that's the only one. But we could drag and drop in, but not drag and drop out from Cubase or Nuendo. All right, so we have Spiros, Lefkofridis, checking in from Greece. And so thanks for joining us today. Hope you're doing well. All right, Millard Brown asks, hi, Greg, would you please give a walkthrough of hypnotic dance and help to understand a very inscrutable interaction between the macro page controls, the quick controls, and the mod matrix? All right, so let's take a look at it. I haven't worked with that instrument in a while, but let's see if we can. Okay, so let's say we'll open up Hypnotic Dance here. Let me move my phone here. Okay. So I'm going to make my control room louder so you guys can hear. Okay, so all right, so we have Hypnotic Dance. So Millard wants to help understand a very inscrutable interaction between the macro page controls, the quick controls, and the modulation matrix. All right, so let's take a look. So I'm not sure if there is a modulation matrix I guess we get to our step modulator here. All right, so let's say we have our Hallian Sonic here. So we're running this inside of Hallian Sonic. So here what we could do is if we wanted to control all the parameters in the plugin, so if we want to come over here and change the filter, so your attack decay. So these will be like your standard synthesis parameters. So as we come over here, we'll just, now we're going to have quick controls. So when I come over, let's say to my MIDI remote, I'm going to make sure that we could have kind of the 8 go-to parameters. So we have these set up for quick control. So when we want to see what parameters are being controlled by the quick control, we could just open up the quick controls on the instrument track. So as I come over here, I move knob 1. So these are kind of our 8 go-to parameters, and we can see those mimicked in the user interface right here. So if we wanted to, so now when I release the keys, we have a really long release. Or if I don't want, I want a short release. And if we wanted to adjust like our delay mix, so let's say, okay, we want more delay. So these will be, and if we wanted to modify which parameters were on the quick control, so Hallian could do that for us, but we could also just kind of click on the QC in the upper right-hand corner, and then we could put this into Learn, and then we could, click on Learn, select which of the quick controls that we want to assign, and then be able to come over and at this point just move the parameter that we want to be able to adjust. So let's take a look at the step modulator. So again, this the quick controls you could access right here. All right, so let's say as we want to do this, let's do let's see if we have okay, so let's see what parameters. So if we want to come over here, so let's say we'll get a hypnotic dance. So let's go to like a gate. Just find something with. Okay, so now when we want to come over, let's go to, let's say, our gate. So we could now come over here and increase the depth. Or if you wanted, so you may not notice the change until you increase the depth here. But let's say, okay, now we wanted to do more modulation. And if you wanted to have no slope or slope on falling edges. So you can kind of play around with some of the different presets, let's say. And then if we wanted to have like there's 2 different levels that we could. So you have 2 different layers that you could work with and have kind of their own independent . So for each level, you could have kind of independent step modulators with that. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Millard. All right, so we see just a quick comment in French. Let me put that into my Google Translate here real quick. Hang on just a second. Sorry, it's not pasting correctly for me. Sorry about that. Okay, so we see from Tim Weinheimer who asks, I'm running into an issue with Groove Agent while adding MIDI track to it. I can't the controller to trigger the drum pad, not using it in pattern mode. Not sure what, but I think my settings are not set right. Okay. All right, I'm just going to check, make sure I didn't mess up my OBS. Okay. But I think my settings are not set right. Okay. Here, let me mute that source. Sorry. Just want to make sure I didn't make an adjustment. OBS, so it messed it up. All right. So going back to Tim's question, I'm running into an issue with Groove Agent while adding a MIDI track to it. I can't the controller to trigger the drum pad, not using it in pattern mode, not sure. Okay, so let's go ahead and add an example of Groove Agent. Okay, and I'll just load up a quick kit. So okay, so we have a kit loaded. Okay, and I'm not sure if you said while adding a MIDI track to it, I can't get the controller. So make sure, like if you're using Groove Agent SE, you know, so let's say I have the instrument loaded here and I add, let's say, a MIDI track. Okay, so now we can see that this is going to be routed to the MIDI output port of Groove Agent. So I add that and I can still do that. Make sure that this track is set to the correct MIDI channel. So if you added the track to a different channel, you may not hear. And especially if you're doing the full Groove Agent. Now, if we were working with, and you didn't specify whether it was SE or not, but when we go to Groove Agent, the full version, so let's say I load up a kit here. And let's say I load up a different kit. On Agent 2. That when I go to play, let's say my Groove Agent, that when we're doing this and we look at kind of the multi-agents, sure that as we do this, like I may, this will show up on MIDI channel 1, and then when this is on MIDI channel 2, that's when it goes to the second agent here. So make sure that it's not, so I can't get, so make sure it's not like a MIDI channel that's being misaligned. So if I set this to channel 1 and I have this selected, I don't see these pattern pads, those instrument pads triggering until I'm on the right MIDI channel. So check that, Tim. Let me know if that makes any sense for what you're going through. John Costigan wants people to please hit the like button to keep the Club Cubase up and running. All right, we have Guido Roncani checking in from La Plata, Argentina. Thanks for joining us today. We have Benny checking in from Sweden. All right, so Patrick asks, is it possible to limit pop-up windows to one monitor so they don't get opened on differing monitors? Usually most pop-up windows will go to the last monitor that they were opened up on. So if you want it to always go to like you have one monitor for your project window, one monitor for your mix console, and you opened up a different editor window on the secondary monitor, you don't want it on top of the mixer. Move the window to your primary where you want the window to be opened, and then the next time that you open a particular window, it will go there. So let's say if we come over to say our video player, so say I place my video player right here, I close the video player. Now when I go to open the video player, it's going to open up in the same location for you. So give that a try and let me know if it's helpful for you, Patrick. All right, FlyV just writes, I'm scared about them stopping my VST USB on losing some programs down in the future. I got a new USB. So, see most of the programs, like there's a few that haven't migrated over, but the latest versions, like, I could think of like Hallian 7 is going to be on the e-license or on the Steinberg licensing and not on the e-licenser. So, but most of the instruments, anything that's currently been sold in the last 2 years, I think has migrated over to the Steinberg licensing. So your USB key will work, but if you have the option of looking into your My Steinberg account and going to your vouchers and migrating it to the Steinberg licensing, then you don't have to worry about the physical USB e-licenser. But if let me know like which particular plugins that you think haven't been transitioned over, and that would be helpful. All right, so we have Jan Lee Hooker checking in from Hamburg, Germany. Club to Breathe checking in from Rio. Thanks for being online today. All right, we have Zounds by Timo checking in from Wisconsin. All right, we have the artist known as Love saying hello to everyone and wishes that everyone is well. All right, so we see Mark Chiambo says, Greg, on the skipping audio query, I have a client's project. I've removed all plugins. I'm just exporting the audio files as a no plugin mix. The skip still occurs. A Barzo is not exported. If you're able to share the project with me, I'd be happy to take a look at it. But let me know if it's only with, with projects from that particular client or every project that you're doing. All right, so we see from Parabot 2 says, thanks, Greg, that was perfect. And Sway TV just saying, hi, Greg. So great to see you on. All right, so Patrick Manuel A says, hi, Greg. The time markers of the live chat for the previous 2 live chats was not posted posted in the comments section. Kindly paste it, including this live. Let me just take a quick look and see if they're posted. I thought that they were posted. I did them all, but sometimes if I switch accounts, it doesn't share. Let me just check and make sure. If not, we'll get to the live area here. Winters, hit the like button. All right. Let me see. I have my comments not showing up. I just kind of dragging like this, but let me see if I open them up in Chrome, if the comments are there. Because I think the last Control or Command. So here you can see all the index there. And let's go back to the previous one. And here we can see that the comments are there. So let me know if you don't see that or if anyone else is missing it as well. But it looks like it's pinned to the top. So, but let me know if anyone else is not seeing it. Yeah, usually I do it in Safari on my Mac, but I just kind of got this spinning beach ball forever, so I posted them in Chrome. But let me know if anyone else can't see those particular comments, and be happy to check it out. But it looks like they're there. All right, Brett me in studio, checking in from beautiful Uptown Whittier. A hearty hello to his fellow Cubase classmates, and he says, time to be schooled again. So it's not too far from our office in Buena Park. All right, so we have Soren popping in for a little bit and giving us a thumbs up. We see Sable Winters from Bay Area. Great to see you on. All right, so we see, hi Greg, first of all, you're the best. I just switched from FL Studio and wanted to use all my VSTs that are on my PC. Cubase only shows me a few. Greetings from Germany. So let me know if they're, if they are 64-bit, and ideally you want them, if you're working, I'm not sure if you're on Mac or Windows, but if you're on Windows, you could run VST2 plugins. If you're on Mac, you would need to run the VST3 versions. A lot of times programs like, you can't necessarily run Cubase, the internal Cubase plugins in other applications. So if it's like the internal plugins from FL Studio, then they probably won't show up. But let me know if they're VST2, VST3, and if they're 32-bit and 64-bit. But anything that's a normal 64-bit plugin, and depending on your operating system, if you're on Mac, you want to run Apple Silicon Native, you need to run VST3. If you want to see VST2 plugins on an Apple Silicon Mac, you need to run the program in Rosetta mode. And we're happy to have you on Cubase from FL Studio. Okay, Parabot2 asked, Greg, is there a way, let me clear my throat. Is there a way for Greg, is there a way for Cubase to tell me what key a tune is in? So we'll come over Do new project. I'll import an audio file. Okay, so I'm just gonna come over. Let's just listen to this.
Cheese, half in the bag and ready to get out of her jeans.
So I want to take that and figure out what the keys are of the song. So I'm going to go to my project menu to chord track, and we'll say create chord events. I have that track selected, and now we can see that we're going to be in the key of A major, and it'll also give us all of the chords for this particular song. So as we listen to it.
If you could see me now with my trailer trash peroxide queen, she's half in the bag and ready to get out of her jeans. She's everything I'll need, but she ain't you.
So, and then you see the key indicator right there. And if you don't see that, you could actually just click on this icon in a chord track, and that will tell you the key of the song. All right, so we see Night Rohan says, "Hi Greg, greetings from Switzerland. Love your live streams. I learn a lot from them. Glad they're helpful. Thanks for the kind words, and great to have you on live." All right, so we see Matty Rojas just asking, "Any post producers here? I need help real quick. How much time does it take in average for editing the dialogue of a feature film?" So it could really matter like how well it's recorded, if you need to re-record and do ADR stuff. So, but maybe other people could chime in. All right, we have Zai Fernando checking in from Norway. Daniel is happy that it's stream time again. All right. So we see Jazz Dude says, "Oh my God, Apple browser fail." Yeah, it's kind of annoying. All right, so we have Dudu Franca from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have follow-up. I think this is with the, yeah, it shows me a few. So, and just a follow-up about the FL Studio plugins question. So make sure your plugins are VST3 versions, that you had the VST3 versions installed, especially if you're running in Apple Silicon mode, Cubase in the Apple Silicon mode. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer says, "Thanks, Greg. Is the way I set it up with a new MIDI track, and it works perfect. Before I drag the sequence from the Groove Agent into that MIDI, I don't think it like that. Problem solved." All right, so let's say if we have a Groove Agent here, one thing to be aware of with if you have Groove Agent and let's say you have different patterns that are set up. So let's say if we come right over here, let's load up a quick Groove Agent pattern. So one thing that's also to be aware of, like when we drag a pattern over, and if we do this and you go, okay, it doesn't sound like as expected. One of the things that you could do is you'll see right over here that you could have a separate MIDI port for the patterns only. So sometimes if it gets kind of messed up, just put this on. before dragging it out. So now when we place back, let me just find that particular event. So if it seems like it's playing in the wrong pattern or it's triggering patterns instead, just try setting this up, because that way you could have, because when we look at this, these are actually like the lower notes will trigger the patterns. And then as we get into the higher notes is where we actually see the samples. So these lower notes can be on their own dedicated MIDI port, so that when you drag these out, we could have. So, but check just to make sure like this little MIDI icon is enabled and highlighted there. All right, so we have Matt Elston on. Great to see you. Tiago's checking in from Newcastle in the UK. We have Charles K joining us from, I believe, England, if I'm not mistaken. All right, so we see further clarification. It says I run Silent as an AU 64-bit on Mac M1. Can I use it in Cubase or this way? So you probably need to have the VST3 version. So Cubase doesn't run AU plugins, so it's going to be running VST3. So all right, and we see from Mark, says the chord track you just showed is going to change my life, my Cubase life. Wow, this stuff I don't know. So yeah, it's a great tip. And then once you do that, what's great about if you've determined the chord track, if you wanted to create like a lead sheet for musicians, all you'd have to do now at this point is let's add a MIDI track. And then I'm going to create a MIDI track that's the length of the part. And now I go into my score editor. And we could say, okay, let's come over here to our score menu. And we could say, okay, I want to put this into page mode. Let's go to my advanced layout. And we could say show chord track. And then you could just have and basically have a quick lead sheet generated quickly for your particular parts. You could also, once you have the chord track, if you have vocals, you could take like a lead vocal and automatically generate harmonies, and it will derive the harmonies so that it does match the chords in the chord track. So lots of great stuff that you could do there. All right, Samuel asks, thanks for the tutorials. Is there a way to render click onto an audio track? Okay, so let's say I have my project here. I have my left and right. Let's say I want to take between my left and right locator. So I want to take like everything on this particular track. So let's say if I want to line this up at the beginning, so I'll take that. All right, so let's say if I'm here and I want to actually do just I'll do a quick tempo detection on this. All right, so now we have our tempo. And so now if we want to render a click track around the event, what we could do is we're going to just go to your project menu to signature track. And now what we could do is, I'm just going to put this as, let's say 4/4. So project menu to signature track, and you can see render audio click between the left and right locators. So as soon as we select that, now our audio track will be rendered. Let's see where we want to. So our audio click So now as we So to render select the range that you want, and you could select an event and hit the letter P, which will set the left and right locators around the event. Go to your project menu, go to your signature track, and choose to render audio click between locators. All right, so we see Mike Braley says, hi Greg, is there a way to generate guitar tab from a MIDI clip in Cubase? Yeah, so let's go take a look at it. I have some guitar parts here. All right, get this project loaded up. All right, so let's look at this in standard notation. So what we could do is you could go to the score settings. You could double click here, or just choose to go to scores, to settings, and then where it says, you'll see under the staff, choose tablature. You could change the tuning if you wanted to. You could choose to mirror staff. So now we could see kind of the music plus the tablature. We could also say, okay, I don't want to hide the stems, or I don't want to mirror the staff. And now we could see all of the guitar tablature automatically created. If you want to zoom in, you just kind of, and if we wanted to move to a particular string, you could right click and say, okay, I need to move this to string 2, string 4, etc. So, but there's your guitar tab right there. So let me know if that makes sense. So again, just if you go to like the double click, you'll see this vertical line here, double click. Then under staff, go to tablature, and then you could just click on tablature there, hit apply, and then you'll see your guitar tab. Okay, so Fly V just says I have Lander plugins in my USB, some Groove Agent ones, Serum, Analog Lab, Splice, Contact, Reactor, VSTs. So the only one that's going to utilize the USB e-licenser is going to be maybe the Groove Agent ones, but pretty much all the Groove Agent kits have migrated over to the Steinberg licensing. So the other ones, I think Analog Lab, Contact, Reactor, so those aren't on your Steinberg USB e-licenser or Lander. So they may be on iLock, and so we're not going to change your iLock, but iLock does have a cloud service for many of their plugin licensing. So, but all the Groove Agent kits are migrated over to Steinberg licensing. So, and none of the other programs utilize the e-licenser. So it shouldn't be, none of those should be impacted by the USB e-licenser. Some may be on iLock, and you could take it up with those companies and you could research with those companies to see if they offer a cloud-based solution. All right, so we just see from Samuel says, thank you so much. And Parabot 2 says, Cubase is amazing. It can do so many amazing things. It's a clever program. A bunch of very smart people work on it. All right. Okay, let me go to a question or two that has been sent in. All right, so we had a question that I got over the weekend. Someone had done a live recording. I think it was on a Midas digital console, and they got one audio file with like multiple files interleaved together. So I'll just give an idea what it kind of looked like here. So let's say they had a file that had 16 files. It kind of looked like something like we see here. And we look at this file, we can see that this is one file that is a 6-channel interleaved file. But in their case, they had 16 channels. And each of these channels was one track or one channel on the console. So they had like kick, snare, hi-hat, toms, overheads, bass, guitars, keys, vocals, etc. So, but it was all in one file. So they wanted to know how to split that. So let's say when we go to import a file, what we could do is come directly over to here. And there's going to be a couple preferences to be aware of. So we want to go to editing, to audio, and on import settings, we could just choose split channels. So once again, preferences, to editing, to audio, and we'll see split channels. So I'm going to enable that preference. And now when we go to import that same audio file, instead of it being, where we're going to have 16 channels or 6 channels interleaved, so I'm going to import an audio file. Let me just find where the file. So let's say we have our 5.1 interleaved file here. So now when I go to open this file, we import it. It will now automatically split all the channels. So it says, do you want to insert objects on one track or insert each onto different tracks? So I'm going to choose different tracks. And now all 16 channels from the live recording from like the little SD card in the console will now be split up into individual files just that easily. So once again, if you're working with a digital console where you record it on board with like a SD memory card, at that point, go to your preferences. You want to go to editing, to audio, and choose to split channels. Then import the file. You'll be prompted if you want to split to different tracks. Say that you do. And then the interleaved files will be broken down into independent files. All right, let me jump back, see if we have more live questions coming in. All right, so you see from Parabot 2 says, Greg, what's the best way to match samples to a specific key? Okay, just close this. Okay, so let's say we're working with a project and it's going to be and we're dealing with samples. So a lot of samples will have kind of their own, like ones that are kind of have a tonal center. Like you may not see it in a lot of drum loops, but let's say I want to start building a quick project here. So let's say, okay, I want to do, we'll say night call. So I want to find a beat. Okay, so let's say we have this file, all right, and I'm going to place this into musical mode. All right, so let's say we're going to have 9 measures of this, and now I want to find, and when we go to find something that's more, let's see, so we'll say synth bass. Okay, so now when we look at a file, we may notice that you'll see a key tonality here. So we look at this file. Okay, so let's say I want to drop this file in, and we could see that when we look at the name of the file itself. So we will select it. We can see that it's going to say a shot C. Okay, so what I want to do is, let's say I will just duplicate this. So it's indicating kind of what the pitch is. And now I'll duplicate this particular. So we're on the grid. So now as we do this, and let's say I want to find like a little synth type of thing. It's an arpeggio. All right, so I'm going to put this arpeggio in. All right, but let's say this arpeggio, when we look at the name, is going to be in the key of F. So now we're going to have the bass in C and our arpeggio in the key of F. So that's generally not a great thing. So let's say we listen to it now, and it may not make musical sense as much. All right, so if we want these to kind of match, so we're going to make sure that all of the events are set to musical mode. So as we listen to it now, we can say, and what we want to do is right click, and then we'll see, you may not have it visible by default, but right click at the top and you'll see project root key. And then once we have a project root key, what I could do is say, okay, so we listen to it now, especially the bass here, we'll get our kind of tonality on the bass. So what I want to do is, now for the tracks that have kind of a tonal bass, I could say I want the project root key to be in the key of D. So now what's going to happen, I put this in D. We listen to the bass, and the bass is going to transpose up. And this will transpose down to the key of D. Now let's say I want to just repeat this particular section. Right, so I'm going to hold down my Alt key, and I wanted a modulation to occur here, so it's not the same exact key. So we'll start here. Let's say I'll start here, sorry. Then we're going to have just the bass without the synth. So if I wanted to modulate here, what we could do is add a transpose track. So we'll right click and we see transpose track. And I'll just move this to the bottom here. We'll say, okay, right here I want it to transpose up a major second. So I'm going to click on the event and we'll say 2. Now we could have the drums. I may not want to transpose the drums. So when we do this, we set our global transpose for our drums to independent. So now we'll start off, we'll be in the key of D. All right, let me just. So we have C. Or we started in C, but we set the project root key to D. So both of these change harmonically. And now it's going to transpose. But since the drums were set to not follow the transpose, at that point it's going to, the drums won't change pitch, because often you don't want to transpose the drums. And now at that point you could just choose to transpose the entire project. But once you have it set up, right click and make sure you have the project root key. So if I want to change this to the key of E, now everything is going to be transposed up, and my transpose track will still transpose everything up a major second once it comes in right here. So we're going to hear it go from E to F sharp. So that's how you could work with kind of keeping loops in the same particular key. So let me know if that makes sense. That's how you can match the samples to a particular key. All right, so we see The Fallen Pianist too says, can you partner up with 8DIO? They're an amazing company. So, they do make VST plugins. So sometimes, it could be tricky for us to, Steinberg has such a breadth of product ranges, from Dorco to Hallian to, the Grand to Iconica to, Spectral Layers and Wavelab and Cubase and Nuendo, Dorco. So once you start thinking of all those things, there could be potential conflicts, but, obviously many companies, and an industry has been born because Steinberg has chosen to open up the VST plugin specification. So many companies, have done incredibly well selling VST plugins on Steinberg technology for, 25, almost 30 years of VST be coming up. So. Yeah, so we see Tim Weinheimer says, yes, he thinks that you do cloud-based for iLok, and the new Arturia Analog Lab does not use a dongle. Maybe that helps. So. All right, Charles K. asks, can you show a way to colorize tracks based on their track names, i.e. any track containing guitar, say blue, vocals, yellow, drums, green, etc.? Okay, so we just add an audio track, so we'll say guitar 1. We'll say acoustic guitar. And let's just come over here, add Vox. So, and let's say we want to add number of tracks that have the word drum. All right, so let's say we have, so what we want to do is name or colorize based on names. So let's say if we have our tracks, let's go to our project logical editor, and we'll come over here and set this up. Okay, so we want to transform, and we're going to say tracks, we'll start with guitar, and we'll make it blue. So we'll say, okay, we want to say name contains guitar. And then we want in the little action area here, we want to insert, and we're going to say set color, and we could say set to a fixed value. Okay, so I want it to be blue. I'm going to save this as a preset. Okay, so now I want to do some, so now when I come over here, I could just say apply, and now all my guitar tracks are blue. Now let's say, okay, tracks that contain the letters VO. So let's say I called one Vox and one vocals, And I want these to be, and you want vocals to be yellow. So we'll set that up. I'm going to save it. We'll say change vocal to yellow. So now any tracks that has the words VO in it, change to yellow. So that could be vocals or Vox. And let's say we want to, that contains drum. And you could also say tom, hi-hat, snare, kick, K-I-K, K-I-C-K. You could have multiple conditions and names. And let's say these, we want it to be green, etc. All right, so now anything that has the word drums, change to green. So let's save this as a preset. And now what we could do is actually that we have these as presets, we could just trigger a macro. Okay, so let's say I will undo my last 3 moves. I just have random colors here. So let's go build a macro. So we'll go to our key commands. Let's make a new macro. We'll say color tracks by name. And now we're going to find the project logical editor presets that we made. They'll be under process project logical editor. So let's say and we're going to add that command. So let's say, okay, we had blue. So change guitar to blue. Let's add that command. And yellow. And add that command. All right, so right now, all you'd have to do is say, okay, color tracks by name. And if I have these conditions that were created in our project logical editor, save it as a preset, I can now come over. So we see vocals, Vox, guitar 1, acoustic guitar, drum. So I'll run this macro and everything goes well. They'll all be colorized as we've chosen. So again, come to your project logical editor. And you want to say transform name contains, and you could drum, and you could also say tom. You could have multiple conditions here. Set color, set it to a fixed value, click here and choose your colors, and then you could just have a keyboard shortcut to colorize all of your tracks in kind of one fell swoop very easily. So let me know if that helps, Charles. All right, so we see Captenergy Music from Harrisburg. Thanks for joining us. All right. All right, so we see Asterix Korg Studio asks, is it possible to insert background in MIDI remote layout? So if we are here, I don't think that there is a background option for this. So when we go to like build a new MIDI remote, all right, and we'll give it our So here, I think it's just going to be kind of a dark background, so there isn't a way to kind of put your own user images there. All right, and we see what is a blind panel. All right, so let me just see if it's one of the options here. Just see if I could look it up real quick. All right, let me just see. So if we come over here, let's add. All right, I'll just see if I can find it real quick. Some of them are more decorative to match the actual. All right, let me just see if I could dig it up here quickly. So I know sometimes that the lamps, like we could use to illuminate, like lamps on different devices. I think this might be more of just decorative. Like sometimes, like we could put in, like the piano keys. The piano keys can't necessarily, trigger anything. But let me see if I could get back to that. I'll see if I could find it quickly here. See if it shows up here. If not, I'll move on. So sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I'll see if I could find it and have an answer for Friday's live stream on the blind panel. But it seems like it might be just one that's going to be set up. Maybe that kind of may mimic the graphics of a particular device on it, but maybe doesn't actually transmit MIDI CCs, but I'll see if I could dig up the answers for Friday's live stream. Sorry about that. All right, so we see Charles K. just says fantastic. Okay, we see Jazz Dude. Yeah, if you want, I'll send over all the latest MIDI logical and project logical editors. All right, so we see Charles K. says, so I can use the MIDI remote to trigger colorize macro, right? Yeah, so if we come over here, so say you just want to assign the MIDI remote, all you'd have to do is come over and to your particular device, say let's go to your key commands, and you'll see process, or you'll see the macro. And then you would just select the preset from within here. So, and then that would be an assignable function from the MIDI remote, so you could just hit one button and it would colorize everything for you. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we see from Parabot2, says, Greg, do you think in the future Cubase may do something for their Cubase guitar section, like a neural amp modeler? So obviously, Steinberg was the first company that actually did any modeling of guitar amps way back when, going back to 1995 with Red Velvet. So I'm not, we'll see. We're also obviously part of the Yamaha family is Line 6. So, we may, there could be something, perhaps a technology sharing in the future between the two companies, since they really kind of focus on that technology, and they have, but Steinberg is always kind of updating their plugins as well. So like even in the last round, there was the vocal chain, the new Vox comp, you have the the new EQs as well. So kind of the Pultec style EQs, those were added. You also have like on Dynamics, you have the black valve compressor. So, but I'm not sure, I haven't heard it. We'll see what comes out in the next version of Cubase, but there's always possibilities of, enhancing plugins and adding those options as well. Okay, FlyV just says, another thing I've been wondering is how to determine the length of verses and courses while creating a track. Okay, so let me just open up a track here. All right, so let's say as we're listening to this, let's say we want to set up our verse and chorus. Okay, so let's say we'll start our project. We'll just open this up. All right, so let's say as we're coming here, let's say, okay, we have kind of our markers, and then if let's say we have like this range, I'll just double click between the markers here. So let's say this will probably be like verse 1. I'm just going to check. So let's say maybe this is a pre-chorus, but let's say we want to know the length. So I have markers set up, or if you want to just kind of grab the range tool. So right now we could see in the info line that we can see our range start and our range end. And we also see our range length. Now we see this in bars, and you can probably figure out that if we start at 6 and end at 14, that's 8 bars. But if you want this in absolute time, what you could do is just change your right click on the timeline, and you could switch your master time to seconds. So here we can see that this is 21.098 seconds. And if you have markers set up, you could just double click between the markers, and we can see that the pre-chorus is actually 13.209 seconds. So, and another quick way, if you don't want to always have to right click, if we have you'll see two different time formats. So you have your primary and a secondary display. So I'm going to switch my secondary display to seconds. You may have to just kind of take these 3 little dots and move them over to the right. Then when you hit the period key on your computer keyboard, not on the numeric keypad, but just on the American keyboard, it's just above and to the right on the from the space bar, that will switch from your primary to secondary display. So if we look at my length, we can say, okay, this is going to be, basically almost 8 measures, but when I switch, we can see that's 21 seconds. When I double click between whatever this range selected is, whatever the range selection is, it will tell me the amount of time here. But again, hit the period key, and then we could just switch between our primary and secondary. And if the secondary is set to seconds, at that point you could just simply see the values represented in bars and beats or seconds by hitting the period key and switching back and forth between your primary and secondary time displays. Okay. So John Black asks, hi Greg and everyone, I'm running Cubase 11 Pro on Windows 10. It seems that 7 out of 10 times Cubase doesn't close properly, so I have to use Task Manager to close. Any idea why? So generally, if it's not closing properly, it's a plugin that's not releasing the memory. So when this happens, it's often going to be a third-party plugin that just says that's still kind of taking up memory. So it's going to be the cause. So if you have any third-party plugins, see if you save the project under a different name without the third-party plugins, that you'd find that those plugins, that particular plugins are going to be causing your Cubase not to close properly because they don't release the memory. All right, Anders McCormack asks, hi Greg, I recorded some MIDI and didn't pay attention to the tempo. I need to change the tempo without the MIDI part shrinking. Is this possible? Sorry for the noob question, thanks. All right, so let's set it up real quick here. I'll just do a quick drum part because it's very obvious. Okay, so let's say my tempo is 108. I have a drum part here. Okay, so I'm going to just create a MIDI thing, like a MIDI event here. Let's put it on our kick. I'm going to put it on straight quarter notes. Okay, so let's say we have this pattern now, and this pattern is going to play. I'll duplicate this a couple times. Okay, so now when we play our pattern, all right, and all right, so we'll play it with a click. All right, and so we'll just duplicate this. All right, we'll glue these all together. So right now at 108, our kick is playing on the grid. So a lot of times when we slow down MIDI, the drum events will slow down. But if so the MIDI will match the tempo. But if we take the track, I want to select the track, not the event, but the track. And we see this little musical mode, musical time base for the track. I'm going to switch this to linear. So now when we play this, I'm going to change the tempo. These events are still going to play at 108 beats per minute. So we'll hear the metronome is our tempo, and the kicks, which are perfectly aligned now to the tempo. So now I'm going to adjust the tempo down. So we will now. So when I've I've slowed down the tempo, the kicks are playing at the same time, but when I adjust the tempo, the kicks aren't. They're playing back at the same exact time that they were. So if I go back to 108, perfectly aligned, because now that this is in linear mode, this particular track isn't going to change based upon the tempo. But that's really all you have to do is just select the track. If we see the musical note, that's going to change the timing of the events on this track based upon the actual metronome. And when this is in linear mode, those events are tied to their time position, not necessarily the bar and beat. So as we adjust the tempo, at that point we can just simply keep our values in their original spot. All right, so we have Virtual LAN. It says, hi, Greg. Alan from Scotland. Or Virtue Alan, maybe. I've watched many of your videos since I got Cubase 13. Would simply like to thank you for showing us around and helping us to be creative. All right. So we see Anders McCormack says, oh, man, I feel stupid. I was looking for musical mode everywhere, like for audio clips. Thanks, Greg. So yeah, so it's a little different because like audio events could also have a linear or musical time base. So like if you wanted a sound effect to always hit a specific spot in the film, you could put it in linear, and then it's not subjected to the particular tempo changes. But, and with audio, what's different is, that we could have multiple events. So if we have different loops, I could say, okay, we have this event, and this event, but maybe I don't want this one to be musical, and I want these two. Or I want these two to be musical and I want this one to not. So you could kind of, on an audio track, because what it's actually doing is kind of at the event level, whereas for MIDI it's going to be on the track. So just set that right there to linear mode, and that should do the trick for you. So don't feel bad about missing it. That's what keeps me employed. All right, so wonderful to see Pertti Komenen checking in from Finland. We have Parabot 2 says, don't feel stupid. I'm always making mistakes. There's so much going on in Cubase, it's easy to forget things. Yeah, and, the reason that I can answer so many questions is I've just made the mistakes before you have. And hopefully I've learned from my experiences of making lots of mistakes. So, but yeah, never feel bad about missing something, Just know that in Cubase, a lot of times you're one mouse click away from happiness and doing what you want to do. All right, let's jump over to some of our questions that we had sent in. All right, so one question we had sent in was how to make a duplicate of an event and move the event afterward over to the right. Okay, so let's say I have these 3 events here, and I'm just going to have them all kind of nudge on a grid here real quick. All right, and let's say I'll change the color of this particular event here so that we can see our colors will be obvious. So what we want to do is basically almost duplicate this event. And a lot of times what happens when we duplicate that particular event, it goes over top of the event that follows it. Okay, so but what we want to do in this case is to duplicate this event and move this event out of the way further down the timeline, but still kind of have it aligned musically to the grid. So let's say I'll just put that one in musical mode here. So I want to take this event, I want to duplicate this. I don't want to have to move this over and then duplicate, just Control or Command D, and then align that. So I want to kind of automate this process so I could feel cool about doing it. So I want to duplicate this event and have the event duplicate not overlap the other event, but I want it to push the other event out. So I'm going to select this event. I'm going to put my grid mode here to shuffle. And now when I duplicate the event, we can see that that event was duplicated and the event that was afterwards automatically shifted over to the right. So again, if I'm here, we could choose to, the normal grid mode here is just set to our grid. So when I duplicate the event, it is overlapping. But if I wanted that event to immediately kind of kick over to the right to give space for my duplicated event, put it into shuffle mode, then hit Control or Command D, and the following red event here will automatically duplicate and move simultaneously. So, all right, let me jump back, see if we have live questions. Thanks for all the wonderful questions, and if you have questions that you always want to send in advance, check out, you could send it to clubcubase at steinberg.de. All right, so we have Sam Sarkar asks, hi Greg, can you help me with how to use multiple tempo in the same track? Okay, so let's say we have a tempo track. So I'm going to right click, let's add a tempo track. All right, so if we wanted to say, okay, here at this point, now one of the things that we could do is if we kind of slide over here, we could choose whether we want to step or ramp. So let's say I want that to ramp. I want to do a step change here. So we start off at this tempo of, let's say 108. At this bar, I want to go to 140. Where this comes in, I want it to go to, so if we select the tempo node, we can say, okay, I want this to be 120 perfectly. And then I'm going to just come over here. Let's put this in, and I want that to ramp down to 96. So here we could have multiple tempo changes on the track. Now, sometimes you may want to also experiment. So, that's pretty straightforward. But let's say I wanted to try an alternate tempo track. So I wanted to have multiple tempo tracks available to access. So what we could do here is come over and say, let's duplicate I won't duplicate the version. What I'm going to do is, sorry about that. We'll go to our tempo and I'll say, let's do a new version. So we can say, okay, I want this to ramp instead from 108 to 140. And I wanted to ramp down here, and I want that. Now what I could do is come over, let's do a different tempo map all together. And at this point, we could just pick and choose between our different track versions for different tempo maps right here from our track versions. So if you want multiple tempo changes on a single track, you could just simply do that and we kind of slide over. You could see whether you want this to ramp or step, or if we want to have different tempo tracks, like alternative tempo tracks, we could just come over here and make new track versions between the different tempos. All right, let me just find where I was. All right. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Sam. All right, Daniel just says, I've just made the mistakes before you have. Such a humble thing to say. It's true. You don't learn anything if you don't make mistakes. All right, Doug Michael says, love Extreme. I noticed there are some patches that have 2 Extreme layers. Is there a way to do that for a custom Extreme patch? Let's take a look. So Extreme is a free instrument. Came out when I think Callion 7.1 came out. So if you haven't downloaded it, do. It's worth the price of admission, plus a lot more. So Extreme is kind of a monophonic synth that's just kind of like, play one note and it's a whole soundtrack. All right, let me see if I can find particular. Let me know if so here we could have like the program and the layers. So let's see. If it's just kind of layered. So it could be like when you go to the program that you could have different layers here. So you could try just clicking on the program and maybe, taking the 2 layers. So let's say if we come over here, let's mute. So then we can edit this particular layer. So try clicking on the program and then, you might be able to drag over. But if there's a particular preset that you're noticing, so let me just see if we can now just drag. So now I could drag over like that loop and do the spectral synthesis of it. And let's combine that with so try just going to the programs, drag over the layer, and then you could just take like a particular audio file. We'll go to like layer 3 here. And then you could just have incredible amounts of fun and feel like you're a total genius sound designer for dragging a hand clap sample in and letting Xstream do its thing. So FlyV just says one more mouse click. Ooh. All right, so Tim Weinheimer says it's okay to make mistakes writing a song in Cubase. So many tools to help you correct the mistakes. It's true. All right, so Yanaki Ariza asks, hi, I was curious how to create tablature for MIDI with the score editor. I saw it earlier in a live stream but missed it. I would like to know. Thanks. It's from New York. Thanks for joining us today. So it's part of the score editor. So if I just wanted to pop over to... All right, so I open up this score editor and we'll start from scratch. Let's say we have this as our score editor. So what I'm going to do is just go to like the staff settings or the score settings, which you could double click by clicking on this line or just by coming over to the settings here. And so we look at this, we could say, okay, this is kind of what our notes look like, but when we want to see this as tablature, again, we would just select the staff. We would go to our tablature mode and activate tablature. And by default, it may look kind of like this, where we see the notation with this. If we wanted to not mirror the staff to see the music and just see the tablature, we could do that. Or if we don't want to hide the stems and arrests, I could now just come right over here and see the tablature laid out where we see kind of the rhythmic notation included with that. So again, just go to your, once you have a part, go to your score, open it in the score editor, go to the settings. You want to click on the staff tab at top, then the tablature, and then you could just make sure that tablature mode is active. And then you could pick, you know, what you want to do with your tablature. So you could just kind of see it if you don't want to mirror the musical staff, if you want to hide the stems. And then again, if you wanted to edit the tab and say, okay, oh, I want this to be on a different string, you could just simply right click and move to different strings. So you could try that. Yeah, it's been in Cubase since I think first time I went to Hamburg in 1994. It's probably just about 30 years ago now. They showed that new feature for the first time with Cubase Score for Atari. So it was exciting back then too. Okay. Let's see. Anders McCormack says these live streams are invaluable. So many questions Google couldn't answer. Greg knows the answer straight away. I try to be helpful. I have to look up blind panels and read up on that, but try to help people. But glad I could still beat Google, and that, like I had the artist and composer BT. He called me up with a problem. He's like, I went through all these AI sessions to try to figure out my Cubase problem. And then it's like, I called you and you just knew. It's like, why did I go through AI? I should have just called you. So it was kind of funny. So I was glad I could still beat Chat GPT on Cubase stuff. But I'm sure I've given it enough information in like 1,600 hours of live streams or something. So, and they could probably model my voice pretty well if they really wanted to. So I may be putting myself out of work doing all these live streams. I'll be AI'd. But we'll see how it goes. All right, so we see, can you all collab with 8DIO? So, it's always a possibility. So, but we'll see if they want to collaborate with us. But, again, we do lots of stuff with VST with them. All right, Musical PT asks, for the tempo track, how do you have a retard or fermata hold, then back up to tempo again? Can you have a count in to get back into tempo? All right. So let's take a look. So a lot of times I know when like Dorico, when it does a fermata, it actually just modifies like the tempo value. So let's say if I'm playing along here. Here, I'll just move this track down. Sorry. All right, I'll take it off. Sorry. I'm annoying Bach now. All right, so let's say we're starting our tempo at 100 beats a minute here. All right, so let's say we'll go full screen here, and I'll look at my global tracks. So let's look at my tempo. All right, so let's say we want to put in like a retard there. So I'll make my global track. So we'll select. All right, so let me just. So let's say if we are doing this, let me just change this value to 100. So if you wanted to do something along these lines. So, fermatas are, just a formula. So I think we could probably make this like half the tempo or, 3/4 tempo. So as you're playing along, then you could just say, okay, we're going to play here. So we're at 100 beats a minute. So, and if you wanted to just slow down that part and give yourself like a downbeat, at this point we could just say, okay, let's, so you could have the metronome play along the whole time. So as we're doing this, and so if you want to give yourself like a pickup note from after the fermata. So there's all sorts of stuff that you could do with tempos to kind of simulate fermatas, but fermatas are really just kind of slowing it down, and so you could get the same exact effect and have the count-ins as well. All right, Bratman Studio says, Greg, when dragging a drum loop, not groove agent, but from the loop bank, can we split the individual instruments into separate channels, like with groove agent 1, kick, snare, etc.? So what you can do is, if you have there's some functions with like the full groove agent, but let's say if I want to take like this, and nothing that comes exactly with Cubase, but if you have the full groove agent, you're able to do it, or if you have the full Spectral Layers Pro. So let's say we have just a drum loop, kind of like this. So when we go to our Spectral Layers here, so I'm going to go to my extensions and we'll go to Spectral Layers. And now when we double click, we're going to launch Spectral Layers in the sample editor. And one of the functions that you'll have is when you go to modules, you could choose to unmix drums. And this will kind of split out like the kick, snare, hi-hat, and cymbals. So now it's taking that drum loop, and if we wanted to, just as we play it, and each of these can be dragged out as well. So we say, okay, I want to come here, and I want the snare on its own track. I could just drag it out and create an audio track of the snare. And so with the full Spectral Layers, you could do that. Now, if you wanted to do it, if you had the full groove agent, like that comes with Absolute 6, not the one that comes with Cubase, but what we could do is I'll just add a groove agent here. So we could get, again, this is in the paid groove agent version. It's one of the distinctions. I could take this drum loop, we'll drag it onto a pad. We will now slice the drum loop. So now each slice is on its own pad that we can play chromatically. And what's interesting about this is you could choose to classify. So we could say, like, blue are going to be kick drums. Red will be snares. These will be hi-hats. So you could classify these different ones. Now let's say as we're playing the pattern, I want every time that it plays a kick drum, let's say I like that kick drum. So think now if I come over, I always forget where this is at. Okay, select. See if it's. But we now every time that we come over, maybe it's okay. Maybe. Okay, so we have this. So now I'm gonna. But we could choose this to be kind of the, every time that it plays a kick classification, that's the kick sound. Let me see if I could. So, but you could, so, but you can, let me just try to remember where it's at. Maybe in the pattern editor, maybe. All right, so let's say I want to take this kick here. And I thought it was on. Okay, set notes of same class to F#1. Okay, so when we right click, so now when I play back this pattern, we could take only like one particular kick drum, and every time that the kick drum comes in, we could have it play. So go to the pattern, and then you find it, and then you can say, okay, every time that one of the kick drum classifications comes up, that you could set all of the same class to that one particular kick drum sample. So there's two different approaches. So again, none of them are part of Cubase, but if you have Groove Agent 5, you could do it, or if you had the full spectral layers, you could unmix as well. All right. All right, so we see Virtue Allen just says, how much has changed since the Atari days? So some things are still very the same, but obviously, like when I used to work at studios before I worked for Steinberg way back when in the early 90s, I remember, just thinking that, this little computer that was on the side and a little cart that a MIDI guy would come in and work, how that was going to just replace the whole studio, and everyone thought I was crazy when I told people that, and I was right. So all right, so Fly V says, you always make my days great, Greg, Tuesday and Friday. Thank you. It's always great to see you on. Says he's looking forward to the next Zoom. All right, so Inaki Ariza says, awesome, got it now. Thank you so much. Didn't think it was so easy. Very helpful. All right, Anders McCormack says, Greg GPT. So. All right, Virtual Allen asks, or Virtue Allen, I guess we'll call it. Question, with Groove Agent, what is the best way to build a new kit from samples that are held in various places and drives on your PC? Is it down to classifying, sample management to make it happen? All right, so let's say I will do a new Groove Agent kit. If you want to consolidate, and I'll do this with SE since we all have that. So you go, okay, I want that file there. I want this file there, and let's say these are from different spots on my computer. I'll take these files here. Let's drag them. All right, so if we have audio files that are just all over our hard drive, and this is our new kit that we've made, and we want to consolidate all the samples, and being that these are all samples that you own, you can't necessarily take samples from the media bay here, like from the sample kits. Those are kind of copy protected in that way, but you can take any. So we have all these samples. So now what you do is right click, and you want to say export kit with samples. You want to tell it a folder that you want it to go to. So you can say, okay, I want to put it on my desktop. We're going to make a new folder. We'll call this October 8th, 2024. So we'll hit OK. So now we are going into that folder. Okay, so we should see. All right, we're going to give it a name. October 8th, 2024. It's Teddy Riley's birthday. I'll have to give him a call after the live stream. Just popped in my head. All right, and then we can say, okay, this is going to be for drums. So let's say this is our drum kit, drum set, and this will be for urban hip hop. We'll do it in honor of Teddy today, so modern R&B. I'm the author, whatever. So, and then you want to just click right here on export files. This is the thing that I always missed. Right, and then you hit OK. All right, so we have some of the original files. But at that point, just export the kit with the samples into the folder, and then that will move all of the samples from all over the hard disk and just place it directly into one consolidated location that you could open up in other programs. Tim Weinheimer just says, I have to keep telling myself often you can't break Cubase while writing a song. So, all right, Sam Sarkar says, thank you so much, Greg, for answering my questions in a multiple tempo. Can you explain how to sidechain a kick with another track? Okay. Let me see if I have this project open. Yeah. Okay, so when we want to sidechain something, is often applying a compressor, but the compressor is going to be turned on by another source. So let's say in our example here, we're going to have a kick sample with a synth. So we'll listen to it, and let's say the kick sample is getting buried. I want the kick to have more impact, and sometimes how you get impact on one thing is by taking something else away. So I want to put a compressor on this particular track, and we're going to activate the sidechain. So we see not every plugin has this, and it has to be a VST3 plugin for this capability, but we'll come over, we're going to activate the sidechain, and now we want to set up the sidechain routing. So that's what the little settings cogwheel will allow you to do. So we're going to say, I want that kick drum to now be the sidechain input. So now when we play, we can see that this bass track is being compressed every time the kick drum comes in. And we can say, okay, we want a slower attack, a faster attack, but let's say a quick release or a long release. So again, what you want to be kind of ducked down, put the compressor on there. In the compressor, activate the sidechaining. Go to the sidechain setup. You want to click on the add sidechain and select your source. That will load the sidechain up as an aux, as one of the sends, and from the sends, then it will sidechain the track. All right, so we see Daniel has all right. See, Anders McCormack has a great comment to Tim Weinheimer. Says, I've broken my soul trying to finish songs, but yeah, Cubase was just sitting there waiting for my input. So, I've seen this with every major composer that I've worked with, every songwriter is, just giving yourself a total deadline to finish, and it has to be done, and you can't go back, and you just have to finish it and get it done. It's really easy to kind of get completion anxiety in our own setups, or we're not on a huge budget. So, all right, so we see Daniel just saying, what do you think of this laptop? An Asus VivoBook Core i7, 16 gigs of RAM, 512 SSD. Intel graphics, 15.6 IPS. So if you have a chance of jumping up to 32 gigs, I think it'd be worth your investment for that. So, but it would probably serve you well, but just think of, if you could, jump it up more RAM, it'll last you longer. All right. So wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. We hope you're doing well. And you don't have to apologize for being late. You just have to hit the like button immediately. All right. See, Fly V says he's out now. He's on his way home to the studio from his parents' house. And you can hopefully catch the last half of the broadcast. All right, so we see Terrence Shaw says, wait, what? Samples in Media Bay from Steinberg, copyright protected, can't use. You can use them in your songs, but you can't use the content in making like an instrument. So, but all of the content that you see here, you're free to use in your songs, but not necessarily to repurpose to make an instrument of all of the Groove Agent samples. But you could use all the content for your songs. Okay. So we see Anders McCormick just finished his pizza, so he's happy that Michael Teams is on, and as he's gotten 1 gallon of chocolate chip ice cream from Mr. Michael Teams. All right. Michael Teams is on a mission to deliver virtual ice cream around the world. Martin asks, Greg, are you also a bit familiar with Steinberg's VST Live Pro 2? So I've used it, and I'm not as deep as I am with Cubase, but if you have questions, I'm happy to show it to you. But if you want to send it to me, I could maybe show it on Friday if you have questions. So. Okay. So we see Terrence Shaw just says, heart attack abated, gracias. And it's probably about the content. So. All right, so we see Martin just says, in mood for a demo of VST Live Pro 2. So I will be happy to kind of walk through it on Friday's live stream if you want. All right, so Michael Teams is granting me, says, thanks for doing such a great job at educating us. I've learned so much. 1 gallon of Scoopy. All right. Let's see if the rest of the flavor comes in, or if Scoopy is the flavor. All right, let me jump to another question that was mailed in. All right. All right, so a question. You show how a sampler track can have a single external editor window that is updated for its content to match the selected track so that there are not multiple editor windows open. For VST plugin instrument editor windows, I do not see a way to do this. When clicking the instrument editor icon, it always opens up a distinct external window for every instrument track. It leads to a huge mess of open windows that is laborious to manage when using many different VST instruments. It says, thank you for doing the Club Cubase sessions on YouTube. What an amazing service for Steinberg to offer. So when we're doing this, and I think I have a project to kind of show. All right, so when we were working with VST instruments live in their own, they have their own, it's a plugin. So we, work with the plugin to instantiate it, but that plugin is not necessarily a part of the program. When we go to, let's say we have our sampler control and I select sampler tracks, this sampler track window is part of the program. So it's not a plugin. It's a kind of a core aspect of the program. So once we do this, I could say, okay, I select the sampler track. It opens up the sampler track, even though it's played like a virtual instrument. But this is kind of a core function, a component of the particular of the program. So, but when I get a pad shop, I would need to open this up, and at that point, we could have a keyboard shortcut to edit the VST instrument and open it up like this. So when we're dealing with most third-party plugins, it's not a part of, we actually go out into the plugin. So we kind of leave the program a little bit. So that's why the window management can be handled a little differently. So you may have to, maybe set up a keyboard shortcut for the edit VST instrument function. Then you could open and close. Now, some instruments that are multi-timbral, we're going to be running multiple instruments of it. So let's come over here, like Hallian Sonic. When we go to Hallian Sonic, I could say, okay, we have almost a different instrument when we select. So we could run multiple instruments like Amped Electra or Verve or Iconica Sketch or Tails or, our different instruments. And what this can do is once we have the instrument open, and I'm not sure if other instruments do this, but by design, Hallian Sonic is set up where when I select the track, I don't have to open and close the particular window. It just automatically opens to the correct editor's zone when doing this. But why it's different for like the sampler track, again, is the sampler track is part of the program. When we go into plugins, we can't really regulate the size of plugins if it's, how it's going to, let me clear my throat. Like how it's going to open, the size of it. We know that the sampler track is always going to be this size and it's going to fit into this specified amount of space. But a VST instrument may have 4 knobs, it may have 400 knobs. So we can't really know if it's going to fit in a specified space or not. So that's why the sampler track will kind of make sense for that. All right, let's jump back to our live questions. Okay, so we see that my ice cream flavor from Michael Teens is 1 gallon of Scoopy's Black Diamond ice cream. Sounds great. And we see Michael Teens says, typing is my forte. Ha ha ha. So, but you write and play and sing beautifully, so I'd much rather have that than be a good typist. All right, Sam Sarkar asks, Greg, what is send effects? Can you explain with an example? What is the difference between directly using an effect versus using with send effects? Will it make any difference in performance? Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's go take a look. So let's say we have, I'll just get rid of, I'll just import this. We'll make it work. All right, so we have 2 ways of running effects, whether they are sends or they are inserts. So a send can be used for multiple tracks. An insert is going to be dedicated to one particular track. So let's take our vocal here. You were the party, the big event. I was your everything. All right, so say we have a dry. So I'm going to add an insert effect. All right, so one of the things that we could do is if we have a mono track and we want to put an insert, but we want the insert to be in stereo, I could come and we'll see this little icon. So right now if I put an insert of a stereo delay, so we'll make a stereo delay here. All right, and I want it to be quarter notes. That now when we listen to it, we don't really get the stereo until we put the track into stereo. All right, so let's say I have a little bit of delay. So when I use the delay as an insert, often what we would have to do is to adjust the mix level. So this would be the amount of the dry signal. So we'll just... So now when we listen to it, so we could blend in the amount of the dry versus the affected signal on each of the delays. So if I want more delay on the left. Now let's say I want to put a reverb after. So it's common to have a reverb and a delay on a vocal. So I want to put a reverb on. So we'll just go to reverb and let's put on Revelation. All right, so as we play this, so we have our reverb and our delay. So we notice that the delay is first. So when we use insert effects, the insert effect is actually going to go sequentially down. So we have 16 insert slots. So we can say, okay, my delay is now going to be, the audio is going into the delay, then after the delay it's going into the reverb, then it's going to go into the next insert. So as we listen to this, our delays are also being processed in the reverb. Now, sometimes you may want to have the reverb on, but you may not want the source to have a delay. So this will go through, inserts will go through sequentially. So it's going to go from top to bottom. So if we have 16 inserts, this sound coming out of this goes into the next insert. The sound of inserts 1 and 2 goes into inserts 3 and 4. Now, why people would want to utilize effect sends is, one, that it's going to be a parallel path. So if I come and let's add an effect, it really doesn't matter with my stereo mono switch. I could have this be mono, and I want to add an effects channel to the selected channel. So we're going to say, okay, I want my stereo delay. And now when we go to our channel, we have our send effects. So we're going to come right over here. And we'll say and the blend, instead of being on the plugin itself, is going to be on the send. So this is how much of the effect that we're applying into it. So as we listen to this now,
what did you say?
And I bring this in,
you wished it all away, and I'm left here for 1,000 years.
so now when I add another effect send as if I add another effect send, let's say as a reverb, okay, so we have this selected, we can right click again, add track, we'll add our reverb now, so we'll go back to our Revelation, and we'll notice that the reverb won't be sent into the Revelation effect. It's actually going to be processed parallel. So it doesn't matter what the order is. So when we open this up, we'll bring in the reverb. So we could have the reverb completely independent. Now, some people will ask if there's a performance difference. Okay, so a lot of times, traditionally what people would do is try to make things like often sound like they're in the same room. So it kind of has a cohesive sound. So what some people will do is take their mixer and they'll run the same reverb on every single channel as an insert. So if you're doing that for 30 tracks, you're running 30 reverbs. Now, if it's going to be the same reverb setting, what you could do is utilize a send and use one reverb instead of 30. So you're using 1/30th of the power. And then we could say, okay, this is going to my reverb. So when we do this, we'll just say, okay, now this channel is going to the same reverb that this one is, but we're sending each channel, when we do our send, we're sending varying amounts. So if I say, okay, I want this audio track to, have a different amount of reverb, what we could do now is I could adjust how much of the dry to wet balance is. So sends will be in parallel and can be shared easily across multiple tracks. Inserts are going to be in series, where the processing is going to go all the way throughout the chain. So traditionally what people would do is inserts would often be EQs, dynamics processing like compressors, expanders, and sends would be more delays and reverbs. You can interchange those, but again, think of the series versus parallel, and running 30 plugins versus one plugin with 30 tracks being sent to it via an aux send. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, Anders is going to finish a track tonight, and we'll wish him luck. All right, so we have Peter checking in from Tim Hortons in Montreal. It's a good place to be. All right, reading through comments. Michael Teams wants a biscuit from Tim Hortons. Yeah, I saw there's one opening in Nashville. So. Michael Teams telling me the check is in the mail, so that's good. Look forward to it. All right, Michael Teams just says, hey, Greg, how do you change the name of an instrument on a track if you change the voice being played? All right, so let's... All right, so let's say if we want to, so let's say if I want to come over here to my media bay and I go to my VST instruments, I want to go to Pad Shop. So we'll come over, and now when I double click, we can see that the instrument name here, let me just, so I'm going to double click, and that instrument name will automatically get updated here. So a lot of times when people if we add a VST instrument, so let's say I add an instrument and I want to go to Pad Shop, that it'll be named Pad Shop, and then I can update the particular, but the name is still Pad Shop, even regardless of whatever preset I choose. So that doesn't change the name. But if I come over here and drag a preset out or double click on a preset, that will carry the name over. And let's see if I have a preset here, and let's say this is Pad Shop 01, and I drag this from my media bay, and we'll see that when we go into the center, I'll make this larger so it's easier to see. I drag this, we'll see if this changes the name. So basically I'm dragging this preset to this instance of Pad Shop that doesn't have a name. All right, still keeps the original name. So you might have to just, as we come over here, say, okay, this is Crystal Flower, and then just manually rename it. But if we just kind of drag it out initially, then that name is going to be, the preset name is going to be the name of the track. So let me know if that makes sense, Michael, if that was kind of what your question was about. Okay, so we see Daniel just says, I've been learning a bit about compressors. What are they used for? I know they have something to do with kicks and stuff. I know is that there are spikes in compressors. Okay, so compressors will kind of limit the dynamic range. So in the old days of studios before there was automation, and you wanted the ability for something where you, like if you were recording a vocal, that you didn't necessarily have to ride the fader constantly for a vocal and ride a fader constantly for, before there was, reliable automation. So people would use a compressor to take kind of like loud parts and soft parts and kind of regulate those so that you wouldn't have to manually adjust those. So let me see if I could do it on a bass tracker. Let me just see if I have open up a Hot Mess project here real quick. All right, so let's say we have like the bass here. And let's say on this recording I was like really inconsistent volume wise. You may run into situations like this where, okay, we come here. This is really soft. This note could be too loud. So let's say we listen to the bass part here with the backing track. So bass is louder here. Too loud. So what we want to do is to kind of make this bass have a more consistent level. So what we're going to do is just get to the inserts and let's put a compressor on. Or we could even just do it on the channel itself. So we'll just come right over here and put... So we see like kind of going up. So now I want to take like kind of like the softer parts and we could bring that up a little bit. And where the loud parts come in, we'll see that the compression should kick in. So let's say if we just want to listen to this now again. I'm sorry. So now the compressor kind of makes it all more even as opposed to me having to manually ride the fader. Now, as compressors were used, the compressors would add almost a certain sonic flavor as they were being utilized for this. So a lot of times people would prefer different types of compressors for the character that they would apply to the file while they were doing the level correction. So people have come to appreciate kind of that level correction. So let's say if we're kind of to do a compressor on our master bus here. So let's say on the stereo out. So if we listen to kind of like the transients, like the drums. So we'll go do kind of extreme compression here. So we kind of lost a lot of the transients. So when we do this, we have a lot more transients. And as we kind of compress it more, so where we had kind of more dynamics between the transients, now we could so we didn't really have that impact coming out of the little bass solo here. Because that transient was just kind of masked, so right on the downbeat. But if we had little compression on there and we listened to the transient of the downbeat, you can hear the difference there. So it just kind of allows you to kind of regulate the dynamics. So the quieter parts can get a little louder. The loud parts can get a little quieter and make it more consistent overall. Okay, so we see from Sam Sarkar, says, "Hey Greg, that was an awesome explanation. My next is a musical question. What is the best way to start a track? With a melody or a chord track or with a beat? Can you show example by creating a track?" So, it's really, there's no right way or wrong way. So you could either one, any of those is perfectly great. And there's, a lot of people may start with a beat. And it kind of depends on often what tools you have. So if you had an acoustic guitar and you were a singer-songwriter, you would probably start with chords and a melody. So maybe you may start singing, and then you would add chords on top of it. If you have Cubase, you may start with the beat and then maybe the chords and do the melody. But either approach is perfectly valid. But, if I was and I'm not a songwriter per se, like I can mix, I can arrange, I can produce and play bass pretty well. But I'm not like the guy that actually sits down and, writes a song. But I could take someone else's song and, really enhance it and put my mark on it. But if I was kind of starting, I may just start off with like a quick drum beat. So let's say I want to, I may start off with a groove agent. So we'll come over here. And Groove Agent is great in that we could just kind of load up a basic idea and get started. So let's say we'll just load up a kit here. And I'll go to my patterns. Okay, so I have a drum beat. Okay, and now let's say I want to change the tempo. I want to be a little slower. So I want to be 112. Okay, so now I want to add maybe an instrument track. I want to add maybe some type of Rhodes type of sound. So I'll come over here. Okay, so now I have... All right, so now, I like kind of starting off with a basic beat. And now I have a Rhodes, something that's chords. So Rhodes or piano work well. And I may start with a chord track. So let's say, okay, I want to be, what key do I want to be in? Let's make it G. So now as I hit play, I could tell this to automatically play from... All right, and I just want to do a quick, maybe 9 bars here. So let's say, okay, I want to do G chord, and then I want to do a G with the E in the bass for my next. So we'll say, okay, let's do a G with the E in the bass. And I'm going to put this in a loop. All right, and let's now do an A chord for a couple bars. Let's say I want to change this chord to maybe a D chord. So then I could actually just come over here and say, okay, I want to take those particular chords and I want to copy those. So I'm just going to duplicate the range. All right, and I'll come. Alright, so now I could come over and say, okay, let's just take that. Alright, so let's go ahead and add. So we have a Rhodes patch, so I want to add a MIDI track. We're going to assign it to Hallian Sonic. And I want this to be on channel 2, and let's load up a bass sound. So now I'm going to open up the instrument and say, let's just find like an electric bass part here. And I don't want the chord just to follow the chord track. But I could just kind of drag out, you know, say, okay, I want this to be, we could drag these chords down. So let's say on the bass, I could go to my chord track and we'll choose that we just want to, you know, drag these down. And we could just come right over here, and I'm going to glue these together, and I just want like the bass notes here. So I could come up with a clever way of doing it, or I could just delete the notes. And then as we do this, so let's say I want this note up an octave, I'll hold down shift. Then if you wanted to kind of make the bass a little, you know, you could come here and say, okay, I want to split this note at beat 4. I want this bass note to transition down. All right, so let's say this note is going to be an A, so let's make this like a B. Alright, so I want this to transition over, so let's say. So you could just kind of quickly kind of come up with ideas. And, you know, once you have kind of even like those basic chords, so let's say I want to add a guitar part. You know, so let's say we'll add a guitar part here. Alright, so right now the chords are playing the guitar part here. So on this guitar part, I'm going to go to my MIDI inserts, and let's pull up like an Apache SX, and then we'll have some presets. And then we could also just come over here to the chords, and so we could change kind of a lot of different elements of it quickly and just kind of come up with we want to knock our guitar up an octave. And then if you wanted to add different effects in, so let's say you want to put like a flanger. We could just very easily come up So just in a matter of a couple of minutes, you could have kind of like a foundation, and you know, you could do that a whole project, you know, without stopping at all. So now if I just want to play, and let's say, okay, we'll come over and I didn't play a single note, but if you start with lyrics and that's like, you know, where you're starting with the melody, that's totally fine. If you want to do it with the beat, that's great. If you want to do the chord track, or you could do all three at the same time. So there's no really wrong or right approach to songwriting. If it works, it's perfect. So, all right. All right, so Michael Team's happy to hear Hot Mess. All right. All right, so we see Daniel just saying he doesn't hear a difference with the compressor. So let's try just, I'll try this Groove Agent kit, see if this is going to compress well. All right, so we'll come over here. So we'll get to our standard compressor. So So you can probably hear pretty drastic. So no compression, you can really listen to the transients. And now with a lot of compression. I'd say we'll put a slow attack on. Let some of the transients sneak through, but how fast you want those transients to turn. So let me know if you hear that, Daniel. All right. All right. Yeah, so let me know, Daniel, if you could hear that compression. All right, and Daniel's just asking, is like, okay, what effect are you trying to accomplish? Is it keeping the volume the same, or is there more? So I'll do another example with like where another area where you could run into compression is often like a parallel compression, where you kind of blend a source that is compressed and not compressed. So let me just revert this. So I'm going to I'm going to create 2 group channels. Okay. Okay, so, and what I want to do is we'll get to the mix console, and I'm going to take all of my drum tracks, and in the sends, I'm going to turn on Q-Link, and we're going to send it to group 1. So all the tracks are now going to this group, and then we're going to send it to our parallel group. Okay, so they're all going, so as we play, the drums are going into my 2 tracks here. So what we want to do is on one of the tracks, let's say the parallel, I'm going to heavily compress the drums. So we can hear that this is compressed. So if we were to kind of solo these 2. So listen like to the attacks and the transients. So that's not, and then you can hear some of the channels, like some of the drums kind of really kind of bleed in to it. So again, on our parallel channel, when we come over here, it's almost like described as like a pumping type of sound. So when we listen to that versus, we don't hear any of the kind of pumping, but often, so this is very kind of, and what you often do in parallel processing is you would take these 2 sources and blend them together. So you have the attacks of this one, but you have kind of the evenness of this one, and you blend those 2 sources together. So if we just come over here, mute that. So it could add a little more punch, a little more character to the sound. All right. So we see Orson Welles says, I didn't know there were all those bass sounds in Cubase 13, never noticed them. So that one is actually, the electric bass is sold separately, but it's also part of the Absolute collection. So it doesn't come standard with Cubase, but there's lots of great bass sounds inside of Halley and Sonic as well. All right, Sam Sarkar says, Greg, thanks a lot. So sweet for you to make that track. By the way, that was awesome and so refreshing to listen. Yeah, I'm really not a songwriter. I have such respect for songwriters and composers, but I like to be able to help them realize their creativity. All right, so we see kind of what question from Daniel. So what are transients? I do hear the difference now, but to me it makes it sound worse with the compressor. Like lots of music is just taken away. So transients, think of those as like the attacks. So do you want like a sharp attack, or do you want the attack to be, could be muffled or could be controlled? So, and and sometimes I'm using kind of extreme examples just for demonstration purposes, but I think you get the idea of what you could do with compressors when you need to use them. All right, Sam Sarkar just asked, what's the purpose of limiters? What is the difference between limiters and compressors? So often compressors will take kind of your dynamic range and try to kind of bring it down, whereas limiters will make sure that will often take the source material and try to bring it up to a specified level. So I'll just come here and let's take this. I'll revert my project here. Okay, so let's say I want to put a limiter on my main mix bus here. So let's say we want to go to like a brick wall limiter. So now what you're able to do is to kind of just, set you could adjust a threshold. And then you're able to kind of bring up the source material if it was like really to the point where it's almost clipping. What you're able to do is to actually just kind of come over and bring up your different limiters. So, and we even have a couple different ones. Let me just so even if you wanted to come over here, you hear how like this limiter is kind of bringing up, and this could do inner sample, and you could set the threshold where you want it to be. So often people would use a limiter when your mix doesn't have enough punch, so the limiter can kind of elevate it to the next level. So check out like Razor or Squasher or the brick wall limiter. So you can check those out. But often limiters will make it a little louder. Compressors can make it a little softer, is a really generic rule of thumb. All right. All right, I think we had another question that was mailed in, so let me get to that. All right, let me get the right document open. Sorry about that. All right, so we had a question. Is there any way to resize Pad Shop? This may be a feature request. So Pad Shop is going to be kind of a fixed size. So when we do this, so we could just come over, let's add our instrument track. So when you come over here, let's get to Pad Shop, which we had looked at earlier. So now when we want to, so a lot of some of the instruments and plugins are kind of determined to work. There are some ways if you're on a Windows platform, and if you find some of the plugins too small, one of the things you could do on the Windows platform is if we go to your preferences, and on Windows it'd be under your edit menu, or in later Mac OS versions it may be listed as settings, but when you come over here and go to general, and this isn't a feature on Mac OS, but there is an enable high DPI. So as you do that, and there's also application scaling versus the general high DPI scaling. So you could scale the program and not necessarily the high DPI settings. So I know it seems like a really simple thing in software to just kind of stretch, and resize things, but having that convey and work across the multitude of various display resolutions and high DPI or Retina displays on Macs isn't quite as easy to get all those functions to scale correctly. So, but maybe in the future there would be a better way of resizing things. But most of the plugins are designed to kind of work pretty well in their native resolution. So, all right, let me jump back to live questions. Okay. See some discussion on compression. Yeah, so you see Michael Teams making a good point that, pretty much all radio stations and most broadcast and streaming stuff will have compression on it and it's often going to be used so that, if songs are louder or quieter from their source at the radio station or broadcaster or streaming service, will apply compression so that you don't have volume discrepancies every time a different song comes on the radio and people have to adjust their volume on their radio. So compression can happen, during the tracking process. There's probably, a lot of times compression will be used, a slight compression will be used on vocals. You don't want to have the most amazing once in a lifetime vocal performance ruined because the signal clipped a little bit and distorted, and you can't really undo that. One analogy I heard once was, you can't unburn the steak once it's been done. Once the steak is burned, it's kind of, you can't undo that. So some people use gentle compression on the way in during the tracking process. And now with DAWs, it used to be a lot of studios 30 years ago may have had 3 or 4 compressors. And if you had an SSL or a Neve, you might have a compressor in every channel. That was a great thing about a large format SSL console, is every channel had its own compressor. So, that made it a lot easier. And then but in mid-range studios that didn't have an SSL Neve API type console, there would be maybe 3 or 4 compressors, and it was used a lot more sparingly than it is today when we have kind of unlimited compressors to use. So people get very compressor happy in today's production environments because you could throw a compressor on everything. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions. Let's sneak in. I think we are out of questions. We see Chaz Dude just posted a link on compression. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions. Just kind of looking at the stats. We've had 1,037 people pop in for the live stream here. See if there's more questions that come up. And if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure that you hit the like button. We see that we're at 97 likes. Yeah, and another comment for Daniel on compression. And, you know, if you think about like a singer that may sing like a really soft part, but you still want it to be heard in the mix, and then they suddenly go from very soft to like incredibly dynamic, loud, you know, but you want the soft part and the loud part to be heard, and to keep that controlled, then that's, you know, compression's a great use for that. All right, so Michael's team's just saying Gareth and Pablo are both working. Our Spanish contingent of Hot Mess. Let's see if there's more questions, and there's usually about a 20 to 30 second gap from when I ask to when you guys hear. All right, so we just hit 100 likes. Thanks, everyone. All right, so we see Sam Sarkar just says, how can I create separation between the bass and the kick drum? So this is like a use of sidechain compression. So like, here, we'll just show it on this, and this is our good use of compression. So when we come to this project, as we listened to just a little while ago, I'm gonna just take. All right, so what we want to do is, let's say we have like a kick drum and a bass. And I want the kick drum to come through more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the bass track, and this is the compressor that's on the bass track, and we're going to activate the side chain, and we're going to tell it the source for the side chain. So just click here. We'll say we're going to add the side chain source. So we're going to find that channel, and we'll go ahead and compress it so that every time that the bass drum comes in, the compression is going to kick in on the bass. So the bass is going to drop in volume, and it sounds like the kick is coming through more because what's happening is the bass track is compressed as soon as the kick comes in. So we'll listen to it. It's kind of an extreme example. So nothing has changed volume-wise on the levels of the tracks. It's just, so if we compressed it constantly, we would get that. But now when we activate the sidechain, so it's a very common production technique in EDM music, sometimes in like rock stuff in the 80s when the snare drum was so prominent. You know, I've people told me that they would sidechain the whole mix so that when the snare hit, that everything except the vocal, like the instrument tracks, would all be compressed down based on the snare. So that's how you could get the snare to sound huge when everything else is being compressed, as the snare is the sidechain input for the rest of the sources. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Sam. So Peter just says, hello, Greg. I was just wondering if you received my email message applying track picks to multiple tracks in one fell swoop. I tried what you had said. I'll just do a new project here. And the way I found to do it was, I'll take another look at it here. So let's say we have like 8 audio tracks or so. Let's go over to like our full screen. Our full screen mixer, and we could see that we have so I want to select these particular tracks, and the question was like, we can put in like a track picture for this, but if we want to put in like multiple track pictures at once, so let's say, okay, we hit OK, and so let's say I'm going to try so I just held down Alt and Shift, and then we hit OK. Oh, it looks like it does work with that. So again, select the tracks, and then hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, and then double click, and then we could change multiple track pictures at the same time from the selected tracks, kind of using the Q-Link mode. So thanks for that, Peter. Thanks for reminding me. All right, so we see Sam Sarkar asks, sorry, got another question before that from Michael Graybill. I have a question about spectral layers integration with Cubase. I think conceptually I'm still wrapping my head around it, how to get separated tracks back into Cubase procedurally. Okay, so I have a project that's kind of done with this. Okay. Okay, so let's say we have a project here. All right, so we'll just play this a little bit. All right, so I've kind of pre-unmixed this with spectral layers. So what I did is, under the modules, we chose to unmix song. And then if we wanted to, all right, now when we want to get these into the project, what we could do is I'm going to just select all of the layers, and then we could just drag them right here. I'll put them onto different tracks, and now they're all basically, you know, once we're here. So now this will be, I'll mute the original, so as we play. Now these are all still kind of the same files. So one trick that you could do is just take those files, select them, and just come right over here, go to audio and bounce selections. You can say replace, and now all those are separate files that are unmixed from spectral layers. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Michael. So we see Daniel says, so in this example, without the compression, we wouldn't hear the kick so clearly. Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's kind of carving that space by dropping the level of the synth. All right, and Mati Rojas just says recommended to filter the low end of all sidechain signal for controlling the sidechain duration. That's a great point. Thanks. Okay, we'll see if there's other questions that sneak in. Okay, from Orson Wells. How can I export a mono track in mono, please? Okay, so let's say I have... Just jump back to a different project here. Okay, so let's say here we have like the backing track in stereo and my bass is in mono here. All right. All right, so I want to export, let's say if I was doing a batch export here. And I wanted to take like the backing track, export that as stereo, and my bass track here, export that as mono.
300 years.
So if I wanted to do this as like a batch export, what I could do is just say, okay, let's export, and we can do our export audio mix down. And I'm going to say we're going to choose multiple. So I'm going to take the bass and that. And I want to, and when we do effects, I want this to be disabled dry. Okay. And at this point, we're going to create audio tracks. Now, there's also, if you export as, you could choose like a mono down mix if you wanted everything to be mono or split channels. But if we are doing kind of like a batch export, you know, if you choose to run it through groups or through like an effects channel, once that signal is going through like a stereo group or stereo effects, then it's going to be exported as stereo, so it sounds the same. But I'm going to export the audio, and we'll take a look, and we'll put it, it should load up in the bottom part of the project. So we do that. So my mono bass is still mono, and my stereo track is still stereo. So make sure that when you do this, that you choose disabled or dry. And if it's a mono track, so I could choose to just do inserts and strip. But if it's utilizing any effects like stereo routing, stereo effects that are in stereo on the master bus, then when you choose the other options, it would automatically be rendered with the stereo setting, so that the sound that you're hearing was what will be rendered together. So we see Michael Graybill says, yeah, yay, thanks, Greg. I just needed to bounce him. That makes sense. See, Capital Razor says, thanks, Greg, for another informative lesson. So you're welcome. All right, Sam Sarkar asks, Greg, thanks so much for the explanation. I have a question related to mixing. What's the proper way to EQ different elements, bass, kick, piano, woodwinds, etc.? Can you show examples of each? So, you know, sometimes it's, you know, every song I think is going to present kind of unique things on what EQ frequencies. One of the tips I'll pass along with EQ is, let's say I want to, like I know, let's say I have a chord track here. I will, let's say, remove that, and I want to take this track, and so let's go ahead, and I have like the backing track here, and this is often what I do when I get a project that I play bass on. I will just come here to the project and again go to the chord track and say create chord events. And now I have a good idea of what the chords are for the song. So we can see that, okay, we were probably in like D minor, probably here in the key. So as we want to do EQ points, you know, one of the things to do in EQ is often rolling out low end. So a lot of times you can do this on most sources, even bass, even kicks. You know, just come over here and we have this a low cut filter, and you know, there's probably nothing much musical in this range that is going to be so applicable, so that's going to be used musically. This will just kind of create a lot of unnecessary low end information. Now, as we do our EQs, you know, like you don't necessarily have to push or cut a lot. But one of the things you could do, and some people always, you know, just think of frequencies. Oh, I always have to cut 300. Always have to cut, you know, boost 3K, boost 6K. But it really depends on the key of the song, because you may be boosting a tonal frequency that's not related to the key. So when you come into your Cubase here, one of the things you could do is, like, let's say we're in the key of D. I could say, okay, I want this to be a D5. And now we could boost the frequencies that are actually going to be musically related, because every note is a frequency. So the frequencies that you choose for a song in the key of C versus the key of G would be different because of the key of the song. But in Cubase and in the frequency EQ, you could just come over here, and instead of saying, oh, it's 450, you could say, oh, I need to go to D. Then let's see if it's in this octave. I'll turn this on. Okay, now I could adjust the Q, and I know that the bass is probably hovering around D, so I want to make that, you know, and cut that particular frequency, how narrow, how wide I want that to be, or do I want to boost? But, you know, just type in the note of the chord of the key of the song, and that's a great place to start looking for the frequencies. But every single song will present unique challenges. Sometimes you may want a lot of extra low end in a guitar because the bass is really subtle and playing up high, and the bass is being done by the guitar, and that's fulfilling that part musically. So it's hard to actually come up with, you know, always do this, always do that. And I think anytime someone tells you that, every song is going to present unique opportunities, you know, for mixing techniques. So take advantage of it and approach each song with, you know, without preconceived notions, and try to make it work. All right. All right, let's see if there's any more questions. Thanks for all the great questions. I hope that everyone's learned a new tip or trick today. Let's see if there's any more questions that pop in. All right, we see that the famous Pablo Vasquez has made it in. All right, so we see Sam just saying, wow, glad you share. We could type in a key for the frequency and the EQ. We see Pablo is popping in. Probably just hit the like button. He's the wonderful drummer we're just hearing on the Hot Mess track I was playing. All right, Gerald Ely just says that's my tip of the day, entering the note instead of frequency. All right, we'll see if there's any other notes any other questions that come up. And I hope that I appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to learn some new tips and tricks and be able to use your Steinberg software smarter, more efficiently. All right, so we see JOL Studio just saying hi, Greg. Thanks for being on JOL Studio. Always so wonderful to have Pablo on. Barangadanga Jam Sessions says he also likes the entering notes in the EQ. Pablo's like number 105. All right, so Tim K just saying, thanks for another great Club Cubase session. Let's all go take what we learned and get creative. Take care. All right. All right, so Peter just says, I missed it a little earlier. How many people dropped into the live stream today? Let me just look. I could look on. So far, we have 1,107 people today dropped in. Let's see, Fernando says, note instead of frequency, Cubase couldn't be more flexible. So. All right, so Daniel just says, thank you, Greg, for answering my dumb questions. Timestamps for answers plus Cubase index or true gold mine of knowledge. So there's no dumb question. It's like being in school. If you don't understand something, you ask a question and learn. That's the only way that we grow. I still learn new stuff every day, and I enjoy learning. So. See, Miller Brown says he always learns something new. Peter is just wondering why 1,100 people have popped in don't hit the like button. So maybe they don't like me. Who knows? All right. Wait another 10 seconds or so, then wrap up. All right, so I think we've answered all the questions today. We'll be back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Looking forward to answering more questions. Everyone go out and make some wonderful music, make some wonderful audio, and we'll see you back on Friday. Please stay safe and healthy, and looking forward to helping out on Friday. Please take care. Goodbye. Hey, Ryan.